Do You Even Fail? Your life and business failure podcast, where we cover our life's fumbles, face plants, and failures. Super excited today. We have Ashley on. We met not too long ago. I said we only grabbed coffee once, but we all know when you meet someone that is going somewhere and has been somewhere and has a story to tell, it's pretty obvious out of the gate. We actually met at Backstory Coffee. I think it was a place called Amazing Place. If you're in Minneapolis, you should check it out. I was so geeked out when you agreed to meet there. I was like, yes, because my wife had sent me, and she's like, you need to go check this place out. And I was like, okay, can I get someone to go there? And you agreed, so appreciate it. Ashley has an extensive background in marketing, and we were chatting a little bit beforehand, and I would say proving people wrong and grinding and just being successful, and owns her own company now called Nerd Herd, which I would love to hear how the name came about. So I'm going to toss the ball in your court. Let's give the audience a little bit of context on who you are, what you do, why your failures are kind of worth listening to, and a little bit about your current company, and then we can get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here and happy to have another conversation with you. And likewise, when we first met, I think there was just synergy right out of the gate. And it's one of those things. It's like when you start like networking and you get in tune with like your people, you know within the first 5 minutes, like this is somebody who is part of my circle.
Right.
So, background in marketing. I've owned Nerd Herd since 2015. It was actually a passion project, side project while I was in college. And I had a lot of people that were asking me for various marketing services. And that's how it got started, because I'm like, I'm doing too much of this and making too much income. I need to put a business underneath this.
Yeah.
And did that on the side as I was working in real estate and in the banking industry. And then just happened to land in HVAC. I wasn't really sure what HVAC was when I got hired at my last position, and spent the last seven years learning all about the industry. And I worked for a rep firm and then also some manufacturers underneath the same corporate umbrella. Loved it so much that eventually I transitioned Nerd Herd to focus on commercial HVAC. And we niched down pretty hard into HVAC, and that's the primary audience that we serve now.
So extensive background, you have a lot of experience. Gonna dive into it though. We were already chatting, super excited about what you're bringing to the conversation today on the failure side and the fallacy side. Don't worry, audience, I didn't get a sneak peek at our challenge yet, so I don't even know what that is. But in the failure realm, I mean, there is an abundance of lessons, and we can choose to stay shallow, we can go deep, and I think, audience, the episode today is gonna be a deeper one you're gonna like. So in your world, you've experienced multiple areas of failure and experiences of knowledge growth. And so I'm really excited for you to lay the foundation so the audience is on the same page of what failure and success is to you, and then where you've experienced that in your life. So.
Yeah. So I think a good like first place to start is kind of defining what is success and what is failure. So I want to ask you, like, if you had to define success or failure, how would you framework that?
Yeah, I like it. Failure to me is you found your limits. You didn't have the knowledge to keep going. You didn't have the physical abilities. You didn't have the network, whatever it was, something was missing that you lacked, the tool, and without it, you couldn't succeed. It's impossible. Because then in my opinion, you choose at that point, is this a failure that stops me? Or is this a failure that turns into success where I go learn the tool, I go get the connection, I go understand the new capability I have to have? And that's why I love seeking failure. And I think too often we look at failure, we don't want to admit it's a failure. I've already had people go, well, Devin, your podcast shouldn't be about failure, it's lessons. I'm like, right, but we sugarcoat failure today. It's like, no, just admit you face planted and it was painful. So I would say that's the side of failure. And success is really hard, I think, to tangibly describe because it's different for everyone. And it's hard because in today's world, success oftentimes is who has the most Instagram followers or who has the most money or who has the biggest business. And to me, success really needs to be defined by the individual of what they're chasing. So if you want to be a really good musician or an artist or a designer, that's your space of success, is you've reached a desired capability in that space you wanted to become. And so I think that's a unique space. I'm interested to hear how you define your success and failure.
Yeah, so I was doing a lot of research prior to coming on the podcast to kind of figure out, like, how do I framework success versus failure. And if you look up like the Merriam-Webster dictionary version of it, if you look up success or failure, it's really more about like the destination.
Okay.
And so it's like the final point of like either being able to like succeed at something or aim to succeed at something or to not be able to succeed at that. And it was really positioned almost as like that is the destination. And I feel like success and failure is so much more about the final end point and more about like the things that you're learning along your path.
Yeah.
And so I did a little bit more research, and one of the books that I had looked at was called Leveling Up by Ryan Leake. And if you open the book to the first chapter, it says, "What is my definition of success?" And the quote on the first page says, "Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it." And I was like, ooh, that is such a great definition of success, because oftentimes we look at success as, like you said, like the materialistic things.
Yep.
Like I have the 6-figure salary. I have the foreign car. I'm wearing like the nicest designer labels. And none of that stuff that I just mentioned that's so like materialistic has to do with liking yourself and being happy at the end of the day and liking what you do and liking how you do it and having integrity and all the things. And so I really resonated with this version of defining what success is. So a lot of times success is defined by like the materialistic things. And one thing that I've learned over my last, 7 years of being in corporate and then most recently in the last year jumping to being an entrepreneur is all the things that I defined as success were truly not success. The materialistic things, the nice cars, all of that were items that I hung my hat on for so long. And then after like being in an environment where I'm not chasing those things, where I'm truly chasing things like happiness and time with my family and having that work-life balance, I started to realize more what that actual definition of success was.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point earlier too about people not wanting to admit to failure and just kind of like how the premise of your podcast came about. And I was talking with my husband about that last night, and he said the people that are not wanting to talk about failure are the ones that are still going through it.
Yeah, very
And
true.
I was like, ooh, I'm like, I need to make sure to tell Devin that, because we were talking prior to the show just about, people being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to like share vulnerable pieces of their journey. And that just really resonated with me too. Like, yeah, if you're going through it and you're still struggling with perceived failure, you're not going to be as willing to be vulnerable and share those, deep, dark corners because you're still working through all those things.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. So I think about two things. One, I'm going to touch on what you just said about when you're going through failure, you don't want to share it. And we hit a point, we were talking to some people about our episodes and where we want to take it. And one of the things we hit was like, hey, as these happen, people are coming to us sharing failures they're currently living in, and they're trying to work their way through. And so we're trying to normalize that place of vulnerability more. So we're actually going to start doing once a month an episode where we sit down with someone in the midst of a failure that they're actually walking through and talk through it with them and bring someone in who's experienced that and record that as well to show it's okay to be vulnerable in it as well as after, right? Because it's so easy. I'm glad you called out, because I don't think I fully contextualized that in my head, where that came from. So I think that's really cool. But I want to poke on this concept, because it's so easy to talk about what success is this enjoyment piece after you've had the other things, right? And on top of it, what I just kept going to when you talked is I think about when we watch movies, right? So we watch a movie, we love the storyline of someone's doing good, then they go through a rough time and they're doing good again, or they were in a rough time and they become good. But what I find just intrinsically unique about it is, in the end, if we're watching a movie about someone who's super successful, I wonder what happens from when we watch it, and what we see is that person who's truly successful in the movie, they're happy, right? Like that's the ultimate success point. Sure, they have their business worked out or they have a ton of money, but they have genuine joy is when we enjoy the movie the most. But it seems when we walk away, we still get hung up on the tangible things in the movie. Like in our head, what sits is the nice suit or the pretty dress or the nice car. And we seem to forget, but that person was also actually joyful in their moment. So why do you think we have that disconnect of, why is it so easy to forget the joy matters? That would be my question for you.
I think oftentimes with just like the era of social media and just digital everything, it can be so easy to get caught up in what you're perceiving is successful.
Yeah.
And you're perceiving through most of the time your vision and what you're seeing in different places. And so it's really easy to then associate like what you're seeing in all these different mediums with that equaling success, because the assumed, I guess, nature is that they have these nice things that cost value and you have to work hard and be successful in order to obtain those things, when the reality is there could be a million different ways that somebody has something or doesn't have something.
Right.
And it's almost like a societal shift needs to happen in order to like start equating happiness with success rather than like the materialistic pieces with success.
Yeah. It's almost like the more knowledge is turned into a curse, and the more awareness of what is happening in society versus 75 years ago, you didn't know as many people who were rich. You couldn't see it. So you didn't lust after that. You weren't like, oh, I want that. I need that. Definitely see that. Now it's how do you go backwards? And it'll be interesting to see, like Gen Z, if you're listening, will that be the generation that kind of helps with the reset as they go, I'm going to detach myself from that. But also apparently they buy more luxury goods than anybody. So who knows? I don't think any of us can predict it. But as we get into this, I love where it's going. And you shared with us earlier, you're willing to be vulnerable. So I'm super excited to kind of dive into now. You've defined your failures and successes definition in your head. But now let's hop into what is the failure we're going to talk about, or failures we're going to talk about today in your world that you've experienced that someone out there on an island cannot feel alone anymore.
Yeah. So I think running a business is hard. Admitting to failure is hard. And as I was thinking about, what am I going to talk about here, and how do I, bring that vulnerability to the table? The thing that came to mind most predominantly is I failed the first business I started. And what I mean by that is, yes, I started Nerd Herd in 2015, but when I was under the corporate umbrella for the last 7 years, we had started kind of a pseudo agency. We were doing the team that I had developed there and was running. There was about 20 of us in 3 different departments, and we were serving 8-ish different companies. And so we had kind of already started this pseudo agency environment. And I'd got the blessing from the executive team to then start a mini agency my last year and a half there. And it was up, it was running, we had clients, we were fairly successful. We were projected to hit 1 million in revenue in our first year, and all things were looking up and up. But again, if we go back to like, what is the definition of success? Did I like myself? Did I like what I was doing? Did I like how I was doing it? And I think back to my last day when I left, I was a wreck. I was in tears. Because one, I had, built up this team and this agency, and I was really proud of that. It was a lot of blood, sweat, tears, late nights, 3 a.m. mornings. And it was really hard to walk away from that. But I didn't like myself. It was very difficult to get up, go to work in the morning. I would probably work about 12 hours a day. I absolutely threw myself into my job, but I wasn't taking care of my health the way that I should have been. I wasn't drinking enough water. I wasn't getting exercise. And I knew that I wanted to grow my family eventually. And the environment that I was putting myself into wasn't conducive for that. And so I think that was, one of the 3 criteria that I listed as far as like being successful that wasn't being met. Did I love what I was doing? Yes. Otherwise, I wouldn't have poured myself into it for 12 hours a day. But the last piece is, did I like how I was doing it? Nothing came before my job, ever. And I'm now very ashamed to admit that, because that it crushes my soul to say that. Like, my family didn't come before my job. My husband didn't come before my job. My health, my nothing. Like, my job was first and foremost for everything. And that's not healthy. And especially as now moving into more of like the entrepreneurial space and recognizing that, like, there has to be that balance. You can't continually pour from an empty cup.
Yep.
And that's what I was doing for so long.
Yeah.
And looking back now at pictures of myself when I was at conferences or work events and things like that, I look at myself and I see a hollow shell of what should have been a happy person. Did I have the cushy salary?
Yep.
Yes. Did I have the car? Yes. I drove a Mercedes. I bought myself, my husband, an Audi for his 30th birthday.
Yeah.
I had all the things. I had the luxury. But I was still hollow at the end of the day.
Right.
And that's why it's just like almost embarrassing to admit that. Like, I let myself go in that process of climbing the ladder.
Right. So definitely can relate, right? It's so easy to get caught up in the dream, and have the dream actually become a, almost a captured state you can't escape, right? It almost becomes your jail. And what I'd be curious on, I know for me in the last year, I hustled at way too many things, had a lot of dreams, and all they did was bring me backwards, right? Like, I remember looking in the mirror going, man, your health gone, right? I was a guy 7 days in the week at gym to 1 day a week. And, now I do NA because I don't want to drink anymore, right? All these changes that happen. So what's interesting is when we look at it, ultimately I go, but it was my fault, right? Like, I drove myself to this state. And I think it's so easy to blame everything around you. And it's a lack of boundaries that get us there, right? So I'm curious, as you were traveling down that path, one, what red flags did you choose to ignore? Because I know deep down you did, just like I did. And two, what boundaries now are you setting up to not have that occur again, to adjust that change?
Good questions. Boundaries was a big one. Not only with other people around me, but also myself.
Okay.
From the standpoint of making sure that I'm doing things like taking a lunch break, getting up to drink water throughout the day, like just intentionally taking those moments of rest. My sister actually told me something that was really beneficial, and it resonates with me to this day, and it's that rest is productive.
Yeah.
And I never saw rest as productive before.
Yeah.
Like, to me, I was like, rest is not productive.
No, never.
Like, you're not doing. Like, it's not at all. Like, no. And I've now come to internalize that, yes, it is productive. Like,
But
I
it's
need
still
those.
A battle, right?
It is still
Yeah,
a
right,
battle.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's
it
like,
is.
yeah.
It's like, I know that it's productive. I know that these are the things that I need to do to wake up, to meditate, to have that quiet time, to try and force my brain to stop thinking so that I have those moments to then fill my cup back up. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to run on empty. So I think it's more about like creating the routines and the space to allow yourself to have a balanced life. And that doesn't come naturally to myself, and I'm sure you're probably the same, where, that those periods of downtime and the periods of rest, it's like it almost needs to be planned into my day in order for me to do it. Like, if it's on my calendar, I will do it. If it's not on my calendar, it doesn't get done.
Like, I got better things to do.
Exactly.
It's
the 50 other things
Yeah.
that I'm going to now put on my calendar
Right.
in place of it. But yeah, I think it's just about being intentional, and making sure that you're creating space for the things that matter. And if working out matters, and if meditating matters, and if taking time to walk around the block to clear your head, or making time for family dinners, things like that. Like, carve out space in your day for those types of things that you want to do, and start to be more intentional about it, is, I guess, the advice that I'd give myself 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I want to touch on rest for a minute, because I think rest, so many people say, yeah, I rest, and they more veg, right? And that's not rest, in my opinion, because that's where I think so many people find it as not productive. Because like, well, I didn't get anything done. I don't feel any more restful. I just zoned out for an hour or two, and now I'm back to reality I don't want to be in, or I'm just stressed out. So rest can be going to the gym, in my opinion. Rest can be reading a book. Rest can be on a sunny day, because in Minnesota we don't get a ton, just sitting on your patio in the sun for 15, 20 minutes, right? Rest looks different. I'm a big proponent right now. We got a little dog. I never wanted a dog because I just think they're a lot of work and it's not productive. My wife wanted one. We have a 6-pound little Bichon mini poodle. She is adorable. I'll admit it. And now my thing is every 3 hours I stop for 10 minutes and just play with her because that's restful to me. I deactivate my brain. I give her some attention. I have fun. I'm not thinking. And then I go back to reality, right? So what tips do you have for rest, or what does rest look like for you in your world if you're kind of like me where it's not comfortable at first?
Yeah. I think like the biggest thing that I've done back half of 2023 coming into this year is making sure that I'm not booking myself back-to-back meetings.
Okay. Yeah.
Which is like that's my toxic trait. One, if a meeting goes over, you're now stressed going into the next meeting, which is like a horrible way to start off your next conversation. Two, without those periods of even just a moment to step away from your computer during the day, your brain is constantly firing. I know that there's studies out there, and I've explained this to my team before too. Like if you just go back to back to back for hours on end and you don't give your brain that moment to like pause and allowing a little bit of reprieve, your brain is just like basically crashing at the end of the day and you're not giving it space to like come up for air.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that and you're working these, long stretches of hours, it's kind of the same thing where your brain's not getting that break and you're not able to kind of like hit the reset button throughout the day. So just being really intentional about creating space in your schedule to take those breaks. Get up from your computer, like go walk around, do some stretches. Like it doesn't have to be anything too extensive. Fill up your water jug, something simple. But I think, again, it's just going back to like creating those habits throughout the day. And it doesn't come overnight. And it's really easy to kind of slip back into the hustle. So I think over time, just continuing to build on good habits, setting a timer, putting it on your calendar. I mean, those are all really good ideas to try and incorporate it consistently.
So before we jump into fallacies, if someone's sitting right now listening or watching this episode, they're resonating with what you're saying, but like, oh man, I don't think I'm that bad yet, right? Because we've all been there. I'm not that bad. What's the one red flag you throw at them? Like, ask yourself this. If it's happening, then go sit down and reevaluate. What would be the one you would throw at them?
Yeah. At the end of the day, are you feeling busy or are you feeling like you're productive?
Let's go. That's my favorite phrase. Because everyone's like, I'm so busy.
I'm
like,
so
good
busy.
For you. Do you get anything done though? Like,
right.
I was busy too. I walked for 14 hours straight. Like, didn't get anything done, but it's on my calendar. So,
and in my industry, like you talk to just about anyone. Hey, how's it going? How are you doing? Oh, busy.
Yes.
That's like literally the number one answer. And not to say that people aren't productive, but really looking at your schedule from the standpoint of like, am I getting things done? Am I feeling accomplished? Am I feeling like refreshed enough at the end of the day to like shut down my computer and to feel like I'm coming into the next day feeling like refreshed and like I'm on top of my things? Or is it just this like hamster wheel?
Yeah.
That's the best way that I can describe like the hustle that I was in for so long, is just this hamster wheel of like never feeling like you're getting anything accomplished. Like, yes, you're maybe checking things off the list, but is it ever enough?
Yeah.
And if you're feeling like it's never enough and there's always this huge mountain to climb, that might be a red flag to say, hey, stop, reevaluate, create your list of 3 things that you're going to do that day and check those 3 things off and then call it good.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to not be on the grind so much.
100%. I know this guy wants to say something because you touched on the checklist and he's got an opinion on that.
Yeah, somewhat echoing what you guys are saying, but I've seen a ton of people that build out these insane task lists, and all they're trying to do is, it's sort of one step elevated of the I'm busy. It's I'm busy and I completed 17 different tasks I allotted for myself or whatever. But to your point, I think that it's probably more productive to take a macro look at what's the ROI of those tasks and what's the cost. So, if you're putting in, 20 units of energy for 3 units of return, and you do that 17 times in a day, are you actually being productive? Is that really the best way to A, scale the business or, thrive in your environment, but also B, thrive as an individual? And I think people do run into burnout pretty quick when they take that approach instead of looking at maybe the 3 or 4 core, big picture items that, hey, this will actually drive me to the next step or get me to, whatever the next iteration is of things I need to do. And, maybe have a little bit left in the tank at the end of the day to still feel good about it and, enjoy my personal life. So,
yeah. It's like, I hate to break it to people, like, Jeff Bezos isn't getting home. It's just like, oh, I'm exhausted. Like, what a day. I mean, because if you listen to the best of the best, they're like, hey, what got us here is there's an hour of decisions a day that we have the capability to make. And to get that capability, hate to break it, if you look at Jeff Bezos, now he's super great shape. He's lifting weights all the time. Mark Zuckerberg, same thing. Like, all these people, they also wake up one day and they're like, oh man, like, I could be 10x better if I actually built my body to have the capacity to handle said activities. And I just find it interesting because it's so easy for me to get caught up in getting work done, but not getting, and me being a huge proponent of productivity. And then you look back one day, you're like, that was not productive how I got here.
If I had $1 for all the checklists that I made
yes,
throughout the days, I would be like 10 times what I am right now. Yeah.
Right. You'd be like, I made it.
Yeah, I made it.
And so it's funny. I mean, you look at checklists, you look at all these things, and a lot of them, I mean, the more I dig into the fallacy concept, I feel like we all live them every day, to the point where I was sitting watching a documentary last night, and now that we're talking about like being the most productive self, and it was about being vegan. And if you know me, super biased, I'm like, absolutely not. Sounds like the worst idea ever. I lift all the time, you need protein. And so right away I was like, I need to watch this now, right? Because like I could be living in a fallacy. I could just be living in this so-called norm world, and it blew my mind in the end what the numbers were. Where I'm not like converted or anything. I'm not like, all right, part of the cult. But seeing the value of taking a whole new perspective. There's so many things now I want to go understand. But I would say that's also the challenge, is the fallacy is to jump right into that, right? Because vegan's the new thing right now in the fitness space as I looked into it. Just like the hustle is a big thing that was created by a lot of the, Instagrammers and TikTokers out there. So in your world, as you've been down your business train, you've been down your failure trains of experience, what fallacies have you seen be forced upon you, or that you yourself have believed and participated in, that you're like, hey, let's create some attention to this and try and wipe it off the face of the planet, because that's the goal on the podcast.
Yeah. First of all, vegan cheese sucks.
I believe that.
So do not try it. I have several bags in my fridge at home because I was definitely going down the like dairy-free, gluten-free route, which I still am, and I do like eating that way. But my husband laughs because we went to a restaurant recently, and I ordered a vegan bowl, but I added chicken to it.
Yes. But I think it's
like,
okay.
I was that person.
What's interesting to me, I was talking to my wife about it earlier today, and I was like, what I think everyone misses in the end, like vegan, I bet it does help a lot. But if you're eating all the vegan processed things, are you really doing anything? Because like the additives in there to make said thing taste good, really, if you want to go back to simplicity, just eat whole foods. Exactly. But then now we have everyone out there who's Whole30. They're so excited. I'm like, yeah, but like I'm talking a lifestyle, not just 30 days. So it's bits and pieces, right? And so I'm glad you told me about the cheese, because I was like, there's no way you can tell me that you can take some weird, grains and other gooey things and make it taste good.
It does not taste the same. It does not taste the same. So other than avoiding vegan cheese, I would say like you don't have to hustle. The one thing that I thought initially when I was like starting out in my career, just in general, was that the harder you worked, the more successful you are. And to your point earlier, that's like absolutely not true, because how many successful people do you see that they have processes and systems figured out so that they don't have to work that hard? And I think that's like a big like mind shift that's difficult, especially when you've come from an environment where you've voluntarily worked, the 12-hour days, and like that's how you built yourself up to where you were. And that was definitely my story. When I was hired at my last position, the job listing was for marketing person. super fancy. I know.
Yeah, you're like, look at me. I'm the MP.
Yeah. And then by the time I left, I was the VP of the marketing department and covered 3 different departments and, whatever. It was great, but it didn't come without a lot of hard work. And I kind of started to take some of that same mentality into the entrepreneurship space. And then after about 6 months, I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I started my own business and I took this leap to have that sense of freedom. But yet I'm sitting here still operating like I'm working for somebody else and I'm having these restrictions and I was almost like operating from the standpoint of having to prove something to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
And that like hustle mentality, it doesn't have to exist. Like I can create balance in my life. I can create space to go do yoga at 10 a.m. if I want and still put out really, really great work for my clients. And it's definitely still something that I struggle with today to try and like shift that mind frame off. And to kind of get away from that hustle mentality that's so popular in our culture.
Yeah, and it's what I find interesting about hustle is a lot of us who do it think we're humble people, but I think hustle is an ultimate indicator of pride because you're like, look what I did, look how hard I worked, and it turns to me, my old job, I actually quit before I even had a job because I got on this train of hustle, grind harder, and I would do anything and everything. But it was honor with promotions and pay raises and titles. And she's like, well, I'll just keep going. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, wow, I was gone December 3rd through the 23rd and worked even Saturday, Sunday. Minimum hour I worked was 12 hours a day. I was working up to 18. And even when I look back on it, I quit from a prideful standpoint. They're like, look what I did. And you're just throwing shade at me for it. And you're just saying, hey, I finally worked hard, right? And you're like, I mean, I don't think that's how it works, but it's like, if you look at it, it still was, I wasn't quitting because I found truth. I still left with that pride and I had to learn, shout out to Dell, they have an insane culture of not hustle, of extreme balance. And so it's interesting. It took me probably a year and a half to learn not to do that. That hustling isn't how you get there. It's doing the yoga. So when you do the work, it's really good work versus, hey, I hustled. I did 40 things at 80% versus, yeah, you only did 15, but they were some of the best you'll ever see. Well, I'll take that any day.
Right. Okay, so I want to know this. Have you ever been in a position where like you have your ideal morning, you get up, you do the workout, you get some fresh air, and then you have like a kick-ass day?
Oh, yeah.
And then on the contrary, like the days where you're like, I'm still going to get up early, I'm going to grind it out really early, I'm going to check all my boxes, but like how you feel at the end of the day in like both of those two scenarios is completely different. And I feel like also like it reflects on the output of your work too. Like the days when I get up and I'm going for a 3-mile walk in the morning and I'm doing yoga and maybe my morning is a little bit slower than I'm historically acclimated to, like that's when I do my best work because I'm coming to the table feeling refreshed and inspired. And it's like your brain can almost breathe in a way where it can't when you're just checking the boxes.
Yeah, for me, 100%. What was weird, I don't think I've actually ever admitted this out loud, but in the last like year, I have transitioned back into I like being up later and sleeping in. Huge fan of it. According to hustle culture, I'm never going to be anyone, so I probably won't. But I don't get up till a little after 7, and I blocked off all the way till my wife leaves for work to spend time with her. Like I just get up and just hang out with her. I don't get ready for the day. I don't shower, nothing. I'm just hanging out with my wife, talking to her, eating breakfast, have this calm start to the day. And what's so weird is I'll sit down then all of a sudden at 8:15, 8:20, 8:30, and for the next 3 hours, the work I can pump out is ridiculous. You're just like, I just did in 8 hours what I could do in 8 or 10 hours in 3 hours. And then I switch from workouts in the morning to night to fit my routine because it's the best way I know how to wind down and like land my plane from the day. And most people are like, no, you can't do that. You won't sleep good. I'm like, but I sleep great. So I like it, right? And so it's weird because it's like, well, I'm going against all these fallacies I've lived for years. But in this world, I like my life better. My friends like me better. I don't snap at people. So yeah, it's so weird. And then all of a sudden you wake up like I did and I almost ordered, 42 books. So I was like, I need to read more. I only got 30 in last year. So it's so, be careful out there, people. It's so easy to hop back on that train of like, well, I know I need to go. Like I'm behind. And it's like, behind on what? According to who? Like, what are we behind on? So for sure.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes we can have this like picture in our head of like, who are we competing with?
Yeah.
You know, who said that you need to read 30 books last year
Yep.
and 42 this year? Like, oftentimes we can become our own worst enemy.
Fact.
And being able to like recognize that and then to step back from that and say, is this bringing me joy? Is this making me the best version of myself, for the people around me? Like, am I showing up in the most authentic way possible?
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're just on the grind, like, you lose yourself in that process. And I think that's like the beauty of being an entrepreneur, is being able to like allow myself the space to come back to what centers me.
Yeah, I like it for sure. So, anything else in the fallacy space you want to touch on that is sticking out to you?
I would just say to everyone who's climbing the corporate ladder, like, props to you. It's not always easy. Everyone's path is definitely different. But just remember, at the end of the day, like, your happiness is something that it shouldn't be taken from you in the process. So if you're, again, to your red flag, if you're waking up at the middle of the night or at the end of the day and you're like, hey, I'm doing this thing, but it's really not bringing me happiness or joy, and I don't feel good about it, that's definitely your gut check to say, what am I doing? Is this the path that I want to continue down?
So, question for you on that, because I think I 100% agree with what you said, but I think there's a lot of traps inside of there that culture is pulling people into, where the corporate America ladder is horrible, right? Like, you're their slave and they own you, and all these negative pieces to it, when in my opinion, in reality, a lot larger of the population belongs working for a company. It's the way they think, they function, they operate. Like, it's a really good space to be, and you can be very successful in there. And I think on the flip side, you get then stuck in this grass is greener always story, as well as I would take it far enough to say I think individuals have put too much pressure on companies to make sure they find joy and purpose in their job, rather than the individual creating that, because you can find joy and purpose with who you're working alongside, how you go about delivering your work. So I would be curious, one, to what level do you think it's a corporation's job to give that individual purpose and feel joyful, right? There's a balance in it. And then two, how does a person know, because you've lived in both, should I be an entrepreneur? Should I stay in corporate America and maybe just find a new company to work for?
Yeah, good points. I would say, as far as like the responsibility split, I would say it's probably about like 20% on the corporation and about 80% on the person.
Okay, I like it.
And I say that because each one of us should be responsible for our own happiness and joy.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that your company needs to provide that fluffy environment for
Yep.
you and have snacks in the break room
Yes.
and, 30 holidays off throughout the year and things like that. But it's really more about like, can you find joy and happiness in what you're doing, and how can you bring that value to the table?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, especially millennials, get such a bad rap for this, but it's like they want the company to come to the table and
100%.
say, here's the ideal environment that we've created for you. We don't want to rock the boat. Like, we want to make sure that you're taken care of with all these fluffy benefits and all of that. And really, at the end of the day, like, I think each individual needs to kind of check themselves and understand, like, what is it that you're bringing to the table as far as like your attitude, your contributions to the company, how you're interacting with your coworkers. Are you that person that's showing up every single day and is bringing new ideas and raising your hand in meetings and contributing? Or are you showing up saying, this sucks, why can't we work a half day on Friday?
Yep.
Or are you the person that's, Friday at noon looking for what's the next best idea that I can bring to that Monday meeting?
Right.
Or are you the type of person who says, hey, it's Friday at noon and I'm checking out, my work's done, see you later? And those two different types of people, I think, contribute to companies differently. And the ones that do constantly seek out further opportunities are the ones that get considered for things like promotions and
Yep.
bonuses and things like that, because they're taking that extra step to go above and beyond. Does everyone need to do that?
No.
No. But that's where, the cream starts to rise.
Right.
And then to your question about, like, how does an individual decide, do they stick in corporate or do they go the entrepreneurial route? For me, based on my experience, I just felt like I was always seeking more. Like when I had started working at one corporation, for one corporation, just working on one business wasn't enough for me. I got bored really easily. I wanted to do more. I felt like I had more value to give to other corporations. And so I was constantly seeking out new ways to add to this company or to, raise my hand and say, let's do more for that company. Like I wasn't shy to take on the extra work and the extra responsibilities. I was more concerned about like, how do I stay challenged in my role and how do I continue to feed this need to stay curious and to continue to learn. And that's what really like fueled me to continue to grow my teams, to grow the portfolio of companies that we worked with. If you have that type of personality where you feel like your hunger can't be satiated, like maybe you should consider entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I think it definitely takes a certain type of personality to wake up every day and say, I love work. I want to do more of it.
Yes.
Not everyone's like that, and I don't blame them. There is also a certain type of structure and I guess, how do I say it? Like a certain type of like stability and comfort that comes with knowing like you come to work every day, you do your things, your expectations are clear, you know exactly what it takes to be successful. And that's okay. That is 100% okay. If you're that type of person where you're like, you know what, I just like the predictability in my life. I have a lot going on in my personal life and I just want my work to be a place where I can come and do the thing and do it well. And at the end of the day, like shut her down and go spend time with my family. Like props to you. I envy you.
Yeah.
I think there's another type of personality that just can't shut their brain off.
Right.
And it's always thinking about like the next thing. And I think that's a space where a lot of entrepreneurs live is just not being able to be okay with great.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm like, if you're going to go into entrepreneurship, it shouldn't be a career move. You should be going into something that's a hobby. Like, I love business. I enjoy it. I always like talking about it. Most importantly, I always say, if you don't want to go figure out how to write your paycheck in 2 weeks, then you just shouldn't go into it. Because a lot of people just don't grasp. And that doesn't mean what you're making now. Like, you got to pay your own taxes, and there's all these additional things that go on top of it. So, and be proud that you like your job and you want to grow in it. It's okay. And I think most importantly, realize all these companies exist because most people want to work for someone. So you're not like this, you're not weak, you're not independent, you're not your own person. You just found your space where you can live who you are inside of. And I think that's a great thing. And more people need to accept that. Just like, call us a great pivot. People are accepting NA drinks, like that's a new space people like. And we're working on pivoting to the drinking side of it. So he wants to add something in, I think, quick before we do, but
just to lend you a helping hand. Yeah, I think, drinking NA stuff, spirits and whatnot, is very similar to what you're saying, which is basically just being comfortable embracing yourself, right? What fits your lifestyle. If you're able to have the work-life balance and your work happens to be something that you're sort of choosing for yourself and taking on that mantle, great. If the work-life balance, like you said, the structure and predictability affords you a better peace of mind and you're able to be more present in your personal life, that's totally cool too. But yeah, to your point, if you want to drink alcohol, no problem. But hey, if you don't, it's great to be comfortable in that space too. So
I'm super excited. Ashley let us try wine tonight instead of a spirit. So I'm relieved to take a break because the spirits have been brutal. They have not been our friend. So this brand is called Be Well. I know my AV guy like, show the bottle. I'm a nerd where I'm just super excited that like calorie count in here is just so low on these things. It's ridiculous. So a whole bottle is 150 calories. So that's really low in my opinion for basically what's a juice. This is technically it's a cab is what they're basing the flavor profile off of. A premium American dealcoholized. Wow, that is brutal. There's no alcohol in it. Wine. Yeah. So what do you all think? I did take a sip earlier because I was like, there's no way I'm going to drink all this by the time we get done with the episode unless I start now. But what do y'all think?
It's good. I think it also doesn't have that burning taste that you would typically have with like either a spirit or like a wine, like, you know, that like initial taste where it's just kind of
It's much less acidity,
Yeah.
and a little bit less of like the mineral that you would get with some of the darker wines. But yeah, in general, I think the flavor comes through really nice, and it doesn't have that weird watery
That the other drinks
aspect
had.
that the sort of other spirits, if you will, had. Just a fun anecdote. Yesterday, I was celebrating with my lady her birthday, and per our arrangement here, I ordered a NA version of a Manhattan, and with ice and all the other sort of flavors and mix, it was not nearly as bad
Nice.
as what we've been trying. So for what it's worth, we should
like
probably revisit those and give them a fair shot. But
Yeah, I would say the thing I'm most surprised with is the palate and texture feel after I'm drinking. It feels like I would have after a drier red wine, which I don't know how they pulled that off. I don't even know if I'm articulating that properly because I'm not a huge wine person. But I would say overall, definitely something I would drink at a party instead of drinking. I would say it's worth trying. I'm really excited. I'm going to plug an update. So we have 5 NA sponsors now that are shipping us all new products we're going to be trying. So you're in for a long road now. We have companies from California, London, Florida, a couple other places. So if anyone likes specific ones, feel free to shoot us a message. We'll be giving them out to guests to try as well outside of the podcast to bring home and give to other people.
Very nice.
So I'm excited.
And I will say, like, some NA wines do taste a little like grape juice
Okay.
or like a grape, like some sort of juice. This one does not, though. This one actually has more of a profile that's similar to wine.
So you've had other NA wines?
I have.
Okay, so we're getting
I
a real review. So I
Yeah.
appreciate good. So now we have to worry about the other ones we're going to try is what I'm hearing. Some other NA wines we're trying, but
And there's a lot of like NA bottle shops that are popping up in the local area here.
Really?
So yeah, there's 2 of them that I know of. And they have a wonderful selection of NA beverages. So
I like it. Yeah, we've been going to Total Wine is where we've been going.
okay, so there's Marigold in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And then there's another one that's popping up. I think they're going to open up in St. Paul called Lucille's.
Okay.
I'll give you the info later.
That'd be
but
great.
Yeah, you should check them out.
Perfect. So before we wrap up the episode, we obviously need to leave them with a challenge. I mean, we've talked about hustle culture. We've talked about what success and failure means to you. We talked about balance, finding values, really joy in what you do, which always is to remember. It's joy. You're not waking up every day joyful. Let's be honest, people. We know we're humans. But if you had to leave the audience with a challenge that they should push themselves through the next week to think about or do action as well, thought or action, what would you give them?
Yeah. I'll give the same advice that I give to my team, which is if there is something that you're wanting to prioritize in your schedule or a habit that you're wanting to change, time block. I don't know if you've heard of that concept before. Yeah, of time blocking. So
But how about you explain it for the audience? 'Cause a lot of people I know haven't.
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of it. Basically, what it means is if you're going to be doing things throughout your schedule throughout the day, chunking out like an hour of time or however long to do that task. So instead of looking at your to-do list and looking at, the 10 things that you need to check off your to-do list, actually taking those pieces and then putting time on your calendar to time block so that you have time set aside to actually do the action. So instead of just saying, here's what I'm going to do, you're then taking that next step to follow through and to put it on your calendar so that it actually gets done. I know on my calendar, it automatically pops up with focus time for multiple times throughout the week. And I'll go in on Mondays and just edit that focus time for the top, 3 to 7 things that are on my list for that week, just to make sure that I have space for them. And then as of recently, what I've started to do then is also add in time for taking a lunch break and going to the gym in the morning and going on a walk and taking, your 30-minute breaks throughout the day to like step away from the computer. And that's been really helpful, just to be able to kind of create those new habits in a way where I'm already used to following my calendar throughout the day. And then this is just starting to integrate some of those good habits into it.
The one question I would have for you, because if I'm listening to this at 20 years old, I'm now time blocking like 18 new commitments of things I want to do to be a better person, right? Just rushing. So for the audience, over the next week, what's the max? Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 5? Like, how many new commitments would you really time block off a day as you're trying to create this new habit?
Yeah. I would probably just pick one at a time.
I like it.
Start with one at a time. You don't need to conquer the world tomorrow.
A lot of life left, just,
Yeah. Like, pick one thing, whether that's, sitting down in the morning and reading 10 pages of a book, or taking your lunch break. Master that for 30 days. Pick one thing, master it for 30 days. After you've done that, then add another thing in. And then progressively throughout the year, if you do this once a month, by the end of the year, you have 12 new things that you've added in. And hopefully at that point, it's been a little bit less effortless.
Yeah.
And just
like that,
start small.
Because you're not trying to, again, it's not about a checklist. It's about creating new habits that get you to your end result. So again, y'all, when we're given challenges, I think this is something you should remember this episode for the rest of the year. It's not about how many new things can you do every day. It's about finding the new things that work for you and not turning our podcast into how do I stay busy? Like, every week I did something new. It's to find those things. But I want to say thank you for coming on. Wow. Fun conversation. Flowed great per usual. Just, we weren't quite at the, Backstory Coffee. That's just, a little bit nicer. Check it out. But really appreciate you coming on, taking the time, because I know you are busy. And until next time, audience,
Awesome.
go
Thanks
take
for
on your
having me.
challenge. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Took quite a fall, didn't we, Master Bruce?
And why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up.